I'm Samantha Lazar. I'm the curator of academic programming here at the Hopkins Center, and I'm the organizer of our Convergence Symposium, which began this afternoon and continues tomorrow afternoon. And if you would like to attend and you haven't yet registered, there's a link over in the chat. The symposium and tonight's presentation are kicking off our Convergence series, which is a new HOP initiative focused on bridging the gap between arts and sciences and using them to address global challenges from climate change and the role of energy to social justice and equality. Tonight, you're going to hear from two incredible dancers, choreographers, and researchers. They'll tell you about their past work at the intersection of dance and science, and they'll give you a preview of their newest projects, which they will develop further this summer, hopefully here in person at Dartmouth. So welcome Emily Coates and Manu Phuon.
Wow, it's great to be here. Manu, are you there?
Yes, I am. I can hear you fine.
Okay, great. This is something of a transatlantic collaboration. I'm in New Haven and Manu is in Brussels. It's very late in Brussels.
It's 1 a.m.
First, we want to thank Samantha Lazar, Mary Lou Oleski, Karen Henderson, Mark Hanneman, the whole Hopkins Center staff. It's such a pleasure to be here and to be part of the Convergence Symposium. First, a little bit of background. Manu and I first met when we were dancing with Baryshnikov's company, White Oak Dance Project, actually 23 years ago now. And after White Oak ended, we went different ways, but met again as dancers with Yvonne Rayner, with whom we have both been working for the past 20 years. So we share this incredibly rich American postmodern dance history and lineage and influence, but we come from very different backgrounds. And you'll learn more about that this evening. Manu, rooted in Cambodian classical dance, and for me, Balanchine's neoclassical ballet. And when we both began to make work, we started to think about combining our postmodern dance heritage with these respective backgrounds. And then remarkably, both found our way in different forms and to different degrees towards science. So with that overlap in mind, this is what brings us together to create the new project that we're working on, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that this evening. But we're also going to tell you a good bit about how we got to where we are with respect to what it is we're interested in making. And I think now I'm going to turn it over to you, Manu.
Yes, so in the next hour, I will be talking about my work, and then Emily will talk about hers. She also has a little interactive experiment for you and with you, and you can think of that as active research. So, science and dance, dancing the poetics of science. I do a lot of research for my dances, though I would say mostly in anthropology. Any project I begin involves some kind of research on Cambodian culture. If I had to define my work, I would say that it is deeply rooted in my childhood. I grew up in Cambodia, in Phnom Penh. When the Khmer Rouge took over in 1975, I was 9. My family and I fled to Bangkok with French passports, but my father stayed behind. Because he was a doctor, he felt it was his duty to stay, that he would be needed. Unfortunately, like all city dwellers, he was taken to a labor camp where he was executed when it was discovered that he was a doctor. As an intellectual, it turns out he was an enemy of the people. In response to the tragic situation in refugee camps at the border of Thailand and Cambodia, my mother became a humanitarian worker. Much later, she became the European representative for Refugees International, an NGO based in Washington. As for me, I was dancing. Dancing was my future. I started to make work at a very specific time in my life. Within a period of 5 years, I had gone through many changes. I had lost my mother. I had stopped dancing professionally, had left New York for Belgium, had given birth to my daughter Maëlle. And then I turned 40, and I could not figure out a future for myself. So for the first time, I looked back, and basically that's what all my work is about. Very naturally, the first few dances I made looked at Cambodian classical dance, which I had briefly studied before leaving. Classical dance in Cambodia is a form of dance theater. It usually tells stories derived from the Riemke, the Cambodian version of the Ramayana. Riemke literally means a chant to the glory of Rama. It is a poem that celebrates the adventures of Prince Riem in his quest to reunite with his wife, who has been abducted by a demon. It's a story of love, a battle of good against evil. It's full of magical beings, treachery, and ruse. To tell the stories of the Riemke, dancers train from a very early age on for roughly 4 categories of role: male, female, demon, and monkey. Monkey because in the story, to get his wife back, Riem seeks and gets help from the kingdom of monkeys. Again, to master a role in any of these categories, a dancer trains for at least 10 years. 10 years ago, Emily, whom I have been dancing with for the last 22 years, came to see a performance of mine in New Haven at the Arts and Ideas Festival. She introduced me to her friend, Eric Sargis, a professor of anthropology at Yale. The 3 of us went out for a drink after the show. Eric was thrilled. In the performance, there was this monkey character. Eric had unequivocally recognized in his dance the gestures of a macaque. Macaques are small, grayish monkeys commonly found in Cambodia. There was something else. Eric was certain that he had spotted orangutan gestures. But orangutans can only be found in Borneo or Sumatra. So did I know how orangutan vocabulary had integrated Cambodian classical dance? Of course I didn't. Later that night, I Googled him. His Yale faculty webpage reads, his interests include the origin and early evolution of primates, and he is currently collaborating on analysis of Paleocene Euarchontan skeletons, including those of Plesiadapiform primates. He also studies Old World monkey diversity using integrative approaches that synthesize data from evolutionary morphology, genetics, behavioral ecology, vocalizations, and biogeography. Wow, that's quite impressive. Basically, part of his job is to figure out how extinct primates move and behave. And he does that by looking at their bones. I called him a week later to ask him to conduct a workshop for 9 dancers and myself in Phnom Penh. Continuing from where the old Cambodian dance masters had left off, we would study all sorts of primates from every continent, paying special attention to the great apes of the African continents. With this new knowledge, we would add to the existing vocabulary of Cambodian classical dance. Eric's role was to help us explore methodically how to embody different species of primates in various situations. It's easier to show you an excerpt of the finished piece than try to explain it. So Mark, if you can play the first video, please. This is part of a section called Play. This is Le, the dancer, and he's embodying a gibbon. Gibbons have very long arms, so they hold them up in order for them not to drag on the floor. Here he transformed into a tarsier. Tarsiers have gigantic eyes. Oops, too fast. This is a sifaka. These are two chimpanzees playing. And this part here is taken from an actual video of two gorillas in a nest. So one is trying to rest, and you can see that the other keeps bothering him. I don't know why he was so fascinated with that part of the body. I mean, gorillas don't have tails. So you see, I did not discriminate between the different species of primate. Instead, I looked at what they had in common and gathered information around one main topic for each section. The section you just saw was about play. Other sections include studies on locomotion, fighting, territory. We had another section called mirror. Apes recognize themselves in the mirror, which means that they have a sense of self. By the way, only two other animals are self-aware, the dolphin and the elephant. And all three species are capable of compassion. The next excerpt will show you how we translated the documentation we had into dance.
In recent years, photos and videos have emerged showing great apes, notably gorillas and chimpanzees, reacting to the deaths of members of their communities. Humans might interpret the reactions as mourning, but is it?
So this is a rehearsal footage. We didn't use everything. It's mainly research. Eric sent me the National Geographic death scene a few months before rehearsals. When I saw the video, everything kind of fell into place. The possibility of a death ritual in chimpanzee societies, by the way, is still a controversial theory in primatology, was just mind-blowing. It convinced me to focus on the disturbing continuity between them and us. And here I can't resist showing you Eric at work. It's very short. Mark, please. So Eric is explaining how gibbons hang and swing from branches. He's correcting the dancers and showing them how to shape their hands. It's a question of using the right phalange. You see, it's all very detailed and precise. So we performed Khmeropity 3, Source Primate, at the Guggenheim. After the run in New York, we were granted an audience with King Sihamoni of Cambodia. You know, the king was a ballet dancer in Prague. He complimented and thanked us for our contribution to Cambodian dance. Wow, that felt like quite an achievement. So this brings me to the current project, which is still in research phase and therefore very, very vague. I want to create a ritual around the theme of trees and water. Cambodia is in a hot zone in terms of global warming, prone to typhoons, floods, droughts, and all kinds of other natural catastrophes. But we all know the problem is not limited to Cambodia. So for this next project, I depart from a childhood memory. When I was little, my mother, who was kind of an adventurer, had to oversee a construction site in the forest where trees were being cleared to lay down railroad tracks. I don't remember exactly why or when, but for some reason, she took me with her. When we arrived, all activities had ceased. The team in place explained that they were having problems with one tree. The tree in question was inhabited by a female spirit, and she was threatening to kill 6 people if they took down her home. After many rituals and prayers and gifts of perfume and food, the pressure from the company's management prevailed and the tree was felled. Within 2 weeks, 6 of the men who were present that day died of malaria. I saw a documentary recently that draws a striking parallel to this story. In the 80s, in the Limpopo savanna of South Africa, a great drought dried up all the springs and destroyed much of the vegetation. Only the acacias remained, becoming the only source of food for many herbivores, including the kudu, a kind of antelope. Suddenly, a mysterious epidemic struck. Kudu corpses were found scattered everywhere. And when they searched for the cause of the disease, scientists discovered that in the act of self-preservation, the acacias had given each other instructions to augment the tannin ratio in their leaves. Kudus were dying, poisoned by leaves that would normally have been perfectly good food. According to biologist Susan Simard, trees communicate and collaborate. And for example, when attacked by insects, some trees emit gases to attract the predators of these insects. Could it be that the tree of my childhood attracted malaria-carrying mosquitoes to defend itself? How interesting that the animist beliefs of the Khmer find echoes in science. Clearly, I have to find out more about trees, and that's what I will be doing at the Arboretum in Dartmouth this summer. Modern biology discoveries point in a direction where man, animal, and plant are no longer separate categories, but form a continuum. Tracing my lineage leads to our common ancestors, the trees, without whom there would be no atmosphere and no life on Earth. Linking my research to Emily, who will talk about the sky and the stars, I conclude with a quote by Canadian astrophysicist Hubert Reeves. He says, "The laws of nature, however constraining they may be, give a large place to play, to the unpredictable, that is to say, in the end, to freedom. The artist is the product of the game of nature, and he extends this game." So this is the gift I propose we offer to trees, to nature, and to the stars, our ability to create and to imagine. And I will let Emily take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Manu. It's always great to hear about your work. I am now going to share with all of you a little bit about how I have danced the poetics of science. And I will start by saying I have been driven in this work by a profound interest in knowledge, in what constitutes knowledge, how we know what we know or what we think we know, and what forms that knowledge takes. I am a dancer, choreographer, and writer, so I think about these questions through those forms and mediums. And I have been creating work at the intersection of science and art for the past 10 years. I actually stumbled into STEAM, as we call it, originally through an invitation from the Dean of Science Education at Yale, who reached out to me to ask if I might be interested in co-teaching a course with a physicist. I said yes immediately, and the physicist was a particle physicist named Sarah Demers. Sarah and I had so much fun collaborating that we continued on. We designed a TEDx talk. We also created a science art video. It's called 3 Views of the Higgs in Dance. You can find it online. And most recently, we co-authored a book called Physics in Dance, which just came out from Yale University Press in 2018. When Sarah and I first started our dialogue, I had a lot of opinions about the work I saw at the intersection of science and dance. And I felt I wanted to avoid the pitfalls, which included, in my mind, either overly literalizing the science in movement, running around as an electron, for instance, which reduced the choreographic complexity, or on the other hand, burying the science under a choreographer's usual tricks so that you could not even discern that a collaboration had occurred. Sarah and I set out to do something different. We viewed physics and dance as equal partners, and we committed to presenting the methods and the knowledge of our fields on equal planes. And Mark, now if we can show the slideshow from our book. These are images that we took for our book, Physics and Dance. Elizabeth Quander, Derek DiMartini, Holly Taylor, Luna Bellartadier, and Derek. And we cover a really wide, diverse range of dance forms in the book. For the illustrations, we wanted movement that would be accessible to many people. So we stuck with more or less, except this, pedestrian actions. The photos are by the photographer Jessica Todd Harper. That's Indrani Krishnanakomsky. And then we took these images and we paired them with illustrations of the forces. These are drawings, original drawings created by the Chinese-American artist Eric Jiaju Lee. Christina Kim is on the left with Luna, and this is Newton's third law. This is projectile motion. This is friction. of my favorites, this is Gravitational Potential Energy. And that's Liam Appleson. Thank you. One thing you learn really quickly when you hang out with a physicist is that scientists can only explain about 4% of the observable universe. And while I would like to think that dance can offer inroads into the other 96%, I fear that in truth, we are all grasping to understand why and how it is that we're here, only using different tools. My collaboration with Sarah made me really interested in the different forms that humans use to ask the big, deep, far-reaching questions about our existence and our cosmos. And I realized that science and dance are merely two different ways of attempting to know the world. My first evening-length performance was about this yearning to know the unknown, which we enact through inventions in science and in dance. The piece was titled Incarnations, and the performance allowed me to pose a kind of fictive thought experiment that layered dance and science histories. I deconstructed George Balanchine's and Igor Stravinsky's seminal 1928 ballet, Apollo, which is considered a pinnacle of neoclassical form. I opened it up and I juxtaposed that ballet against classical and modern physics. Everyone in the cast played Apollo. In the most spectacular turn, I had Yvonne Rainer, the postmodern dance pioneer, at age 82, playing an aging Apollo, looking back on her failures to save Earth. This was a self-fashioned cameo. Yvonne wrote her own monologue. Classical and modern physics, Isaac Newton, and the Higgs boson drifted throughout the performance. Sarah Demers joined me and the other dancers as a performer, embodying scientific invention in female form. And Mark, if we could look at those pictures. Sarah's in the background. I'm about to perform a rendition of Apollo's main solo, the wildest Newton's second law lecture you'll ever see. The other dancers are Irene Holtman, Lassina Coulibaly in the back, and John Kinzel. This is Lasso and John performing a duet between Isaac Newton and Apollo. Irene and I are embodying ancient imagery of Apollo through 2,000 years. And Lasso Coulibaly, a brilliant dancer, depicting force. This is Yvonne Rainer in her brilliant cameo. In the background, you'll see the Harvard physicist Melissa Franklin explaining the Higgs boson, and in the front, John Kinzel capturing her gestures. And of course, it wouldn't be a piece about physics if you didn't think about light. I began to work with the principle of collage in Incarnations, where I took bits of knowledge from the two different fields and juxtaposed them and layered them in different ways. And that's become an important way of working for me at this intersection. Out of Incarnations, I latched on to the topic of light. It's the speed limit that light presents in the universe. Nothing, they think, can go faster than the speed of light. How far the light we see has traveled, and the delayed stories of the cosmos that it tells. And I thought about all this scientific knowledge alongside motifs of light and dark that surface in the dance histories that I inherit, from the Russian silent film era and the performer Vera Karali in the 1910s, to Balanchine's uncharacteristically ominous Central Park in the Dark, which is a section of his 1954 ballet, Ives Iana. I thought of this as a kind of hodgepodge kit of cultural references. These all went into the piece, A History of Light, which I created in collaboration with the visual artist Josiah McElhaney. The project was a study of sorts between our disciplines and highlighted the contribution of women to humankind's understanding of the cosmos. If we could look at those images now, Mark. Sarah Demers has proven herself to be a brilliant performer. She was also in A History of Light. It's a sky plate in the background. This is a 1910s Vera Corrali film, The Dying Swan. This is my collaborator, Josiah, explaining space and time. And a brilliant cameo by Josiah's beautiful walking mirror. After collaborating very closely with a physicist and after creating Incarnations and A History of Light, I still had a spillover of questions. I could identify the dance histories in a dancer's body in an instant, as soon as they moved. And I knew my own full well. I come from Balanchine's neoclassical ballet. I started my career as a dancer with New York City Ballet. And then out of that, met up with Yvonne Rainer, with whom I've worked, as we said, for 20 years. I'm very influenced by Yvonne's particular variety of postmodern dance. It would seem from that history and that kind of embodied knowledge to then naturally pivot to wonder about the knowledge that scientists hold in their bodies and whether it's equally specific as a result of their research. And I told one scientist that I had become obsessed with the bodies of scientists. She replied, "Yuck." But it didn't stop me. I began to read the work of historians of science who argue for embodied knowledge in the formation of scientific disciplines. I looked at literature and the anthropology of science, which foregrounds the role of the scientists' bodies in their research. And I began to study the gestures that physicists conjure to imagine and explain their disciplines. And this started with watching Sarah Demers describe her research. And I moved from there to look at other physicists, each one a unique gestural life, a seemingly endless stream of choreographic invention. I'll show you a bit. That's verbatim. That is a particle physicist who works at CERN explaining the discovery of the nature of the Higgs boson particle and field. So I taught myself those gestures. This is what choreographers do when we're faced with a foreign discipline. We look for movement ideas. We look for gestures to borrow and compose, and organizations and designs that we might transpose into choreographic form. I was so interested in the knowledge that scientists possess, the embodied knowledge, that I decided I needed to spend some more time with physicists. And I became an artist in residence at Yale's Wright Laboratory, whose mission is to explore the invisible universe. Neutrinos, dark matter, experimental cosmology are just a few of the research subjects that they tackle there. I'm not going to attempt to explain those. You can easily Google them. In one of my early visits to the lab, the director, Karsten Hager, told a group of my students that he was aware we were movers and he knew that we were studying and thinking about embodied knowledge. And he said that, of course, he knew that his body was mostly empty space and trillions of particles fly through it every second. Mind-blowing. My art form spun on its head. It was a comment my students will never forget. As I observed and worked with and talked to the physicists who worked at Wright Lab, I started to create a portrait that was teeming with what I think of as invisible dances, intimate kinesthetic exchanges between human scientists and their non-human, unseen subjects, which are both imagined and very real. And I began to wonder out of that. I began to shift away from physics directly and to think about other scientific disciplines. If scientists were actually forming physical and psychic connections to their inanimate subjects, as I felt I was observing at Wright Lab, I wondered what happened between scientists and subjects that were far closer to human beings in makeup and in form. I wondered what happens when scientists look at other animals. This made me turn to the piece that my friend Emmanuèle Phuon had composed in 2013, which she's just told you about, Chimeropidi 3, Source Primate, in which she embedded the contribution of a biological anthropologist, Eric Sargis, who I had, in fact, as she noted, connected her to. And just as she showed you in her presentation just now, I was really interested in the National Geographic video that Manu incorporated into her dance. It was a video of chimpanzees mourning the loss of an adolescent male chimp to pneumonia. The video captured a scientific threshold. Such a scene was new to the scientists. They had never actually captured this on film, and they were wondering if they could legitimately call it similar to human mourning. Manu took the scenario and transposed it onto a group of skilled, classically trained Cambodian dancers, blurring the lines between the world of the primates and the art of human beings. The scientific question was sublimated in her dance into a scene about the promise and the impossibility of reincarnation through the language of Cambodian classical dance. I was so struck by that scene and thinking about how knowledge had moved between disciplines, and between that and thinking about my time at Wright Lab and this idea of invisible dances, it led me to create my current project, which is called Science Dances. It's a multimedia project in which I'm gathering stories about touch points between dance and science over the past 100 years and as far back as 3000 BCE. Across geographies and cultures. These touch points are specific. They take shape as stories that traverse time and the globe. So for instance, I tell the story of an American primatologist who told me that he longed to groom his chimpanzee subjects in Uganda. And I set that in relation to the story of a master of Cambodian classical dance studying macaques to inform his monkey character. Or I move to the story of an ancient Egyptian astronomer priest practicing a star dance and juxtapose that against the creation of a 1932 collaboration between the sculptor Isamu Noguchi and Ruth Page in a piece called Miss Expanding Universe, which came on the heels of the public consciousness of Hubble's discovery of the ever-increasing expansion of the universe. Science Dances is divided into 4 parts. I will be dwelling on animal dances, invisible dances, earth dances, and cosmic dances. Each rubric will also contain a science, so I will be in dialogue with and looking at the science of behavioral ecology and primatology, particle and neutrino physics, climate science, and astronomy. And in each of these stories that I'll be working with, I'll be looking at the different ways that humans build intimate connections to the natural world and struggle to represent that knowledge. And sometimes it's working in parallel, science and dance with the same object of focus, and sometimes it's in direct collaboration. Science Dances is on its way to becoming a collection of essays, a film, which I'm working on at Wright Lab with the filmmaker John Lucas, should come out this spring, and a live performance. And the live performance connects me to Dartmouth, At Dartmouth, I'll be working on a live performance that thinks about cosmic dances. And here's where what I know also turns hazy, like Manu, because the project is still in development. I can say that I'm interested in the Shattuck Observatory as a site and a resource. I'm also interested in talking with current astronomers. I'm equally interested in the choreographies of cosmic dances in different moments in time across geographies and cultures. I have some ideas about the performance I create, but a lot will also depend on who I meet and what I find once I'm on campus, hopefully in person, as Samantha said this summer. Lastly, I'll just conclude by saying, after working at the intersection of dance and science for a decade now, I've come upon what I think is a truism, for me at least, and that is dance reminds science of its body, and science gives dance galactic scale. It's poignant to me that our bodies are everything and nothing in the face of truly knowing our universe. I'm interested in using dance to body forth the impossibility of representing so much unknown. And with that, I'm going to call Manu back to join me. Hello. How are you doing?
Good.
All right. Well, in the last 15 minutes of our talk today, Manu and I wanted to do a bit of a warm-up with our subjects and invite you who are listening and watching out there to have a bit of interaction with the ideas that we'll be working with. So as you heard, if you distill down the new projects that we're working on, Manu is working on trees and I am working on stars. And both of us are thinking about human relationships to the natural world through different aesthetic, cultural, and scientific lineages. So the exercise we have, I'll first explain it and then we'll run it. It is that we're going to share with you two different images of natural phenomena. And we're going to give you 1 minute with each image. And that'll be 1 minute to dwell on the image. It may be interesting and inspiring to you to move with the image, and you can trace it with your gestures. You can let it just simply wash over you. What we're interested in is the ways that you might physically observe and commune with the natural phenomenon. And after 1 minute, there you are.
Yes.
Lost you. I'm lost without you. So after 1 minute of that experience, and we understand 1 minute of silence, it's going to be silence, is radical in this web format. But we invite you to enjoy that silence and to enjoy that opportunity to be with the images that we're going to share with you. So after 1 minute of that, we're going to give 1 minute in which we'd love for you to think of words or phrases that describe this phenomenon and describe your observations of this phenomenon in the image. And we'll invite you at that point to put it in the chat. And if you, Manu, do you want to say any more about?
No, if you feel it's too long, just after 40 minutes or even 30 seconds,
40
sorry,
minutes.
not minutes. Yes, I'm still just start writing. It doesn't matter. We're aiming for 1 minute, but it's not necessary.
So this is all active research. It's an experiment. It's an invitation to think with us about the things that we're thinking about. And I'm going to ask Mark to bring up the first image, and Manu will introduce it.
So you're seeing an image of a tree shooting out of the ruins of the Taprom temple in the Angkor Wat complex. The temple was used for the shooting of the Lara Croft movie Tomb Raider, starring Angelina Jolie. I'm not sure what the tree is. It could be a kapok tree, which is the tree of my childhood, the story I was telling you before, or it could be a strangling fig. So just observe the powerful movements of the roots as they plunge towards the earth through the temple's roof and stones, while the top soars towards the sky.
Starting the timer now. Time's up, and now we have 1 minute for words, thoughts, images in the chat. Anything that comes to mind. Does not need to be fully composed or profound, just
impressions are fine, or
quick thoughts.
Yeah. We can probably go on.
And that's a minute.
Yeah.
You can continue to pour thoughts into the chat if you want. We're now going to switch the image. And I'll just give a little bit of context. This image comes from a photograph taken by the Harvard Observatory in 1888, February 7th, 1888, to be precise. And it's an image of the Horsehead Nebula, which is in Orion. I'm going to set the timer, and 1 more minute. Here we go. That's a minute. Now we'll give you a minute to form words, images, anything that comes to mind in the chat space. And that's a minute. And Mark, you can bring Manu and I back up.
Wow.
Great. Let that be the most radical on a webinar of time. And the thoughts coming in the chat space are simply wonderful.
There's some great images that that we can really work from, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you so much, everyone who has contributed thoughts in the chat space. Thank you for everybody out there. As we said, this is all active research, so we won't try to sum up with anything earth-shakingly profound, except to say these are the questions that we're interested in. Human relationship to nature that plays out in these different forms. And Manu, do you want to sign us off?
No.
Okay. I think we were told we have to take ourselves out. So
yeah,
everyone have a wonderful evening. We're collecting the
Thank
language
you
that you've
much.
shared with us. And thanks to everyone at the Hop for hosting us. Oh, awesome. Frogs, eggs, gelatinous pockmarks aligned.
Wow.
Light of life inverted. Collections in haze. Patterns, pathways, dust-like. Awesome. Mark, I think we're good to go. Thank you.
Thank you.